Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating firsthand account of sudden societal collapse. We're going to break down the exact timeline and the sheer mechanics of one group's escape from a viral outbreak. And honestly, what is incredibly striking about this source material is the paradox of how survival actually begins. We always picture these cinematic, heroic leaps into danger, right? But the data here tells a completely different story. The narrator, Eli, survived not because of some tactical genius, but because of the one thing we literally all dread: a mundane root canal appointment. Just rescheduling that toothache accidentally pulled him out of ground zero mere hours before his city fell. As Eli actually puts it, the most important decision of your life wasn't brave or heroic or calculated. It was mundane. That canceled appointment physically removed him from his apartment building. It acted as the ultimate, completely accidental life-saving variable. Because while he was safely sleeping in his childhood bed about 40 minutes outside the city, his phone was quietly logging the collapse. By Thursday morning, he woke up to 17 missed calls from his girlfriend Mara, his coworker Davis, and a really chilling voicemail capturing the final dying breaths of his landlord. Section 1, the math of infection. Let's take a look at just how fast normalcy collapsed across the region. The speed of this degradation is just terrifying. I mean, let's trace this out. At 4 a.m., Eli's sister Lainey's neighbor is bleeding from a bite. By 7 a.m., he is completely transformed. At 9:15 a.m., Eli misses that fateful dentist appointment, while the emergency broadcasts are visibly losing their grip on the narrative. And by noon, the internet is fully fragmenting. Cell towers are destroyed, and the bridges leading out of the city are either totally jammed, locked down by the National Guard, or entirely collapsed. In a span of just 8 hours, the entire regional infrastructure completely dissolves. Now, the infection itself operates with this cold, brutal practicality. We get a really clear data point here in their 68-year-old neighbor, Marcus Foley. When Marcus is bitten at a local gas station, the symptoms do not present like your typical pathogen. It starts with direct bite transmission, sure, but then his core temperature drops severely. He literally feels cold from the inside out. He loses his mass and his basic human functions. But the most distinct visual marker is this immediate discoloration of the skin. It's described as a gray-green marbling that creeps outward like ink through wet paper. It looks entirely unlike normal bruising. Surviving this kind of new reality requires immediate, brutal psychological detachment. Eli's mother, Sandra, instantly shifts her operating system. She looks at Marcus, a guy who used to give out butterscotch candies and kept a perfectly clean lawn, and she makes a grim calculation. Understanding that sentimentality and practicality can no longer occupy the same room, she systematically counts the hours and has Eli lock an infected Marcus inside their garage, just leaving him to pound aimlessly against the deadbolt. It's awful, but it's a brutal, necessary mouth. Section 2. Logistics of escape. The variables quickly shift from securing the house to physically abandoning it. So Eli's prep of his mom's Subaru wasn't some flashy action movie montage. It was entirely rooted in the strict calculus of necessity. He prioritized space and sustainment over firepower. He ripped out the back seats to maximize cargo, loaded in top water and canned goods, and strapped extra gas to the roof rack. And crucially, he packed a hammer, a hatchet, and a crowbar. He explicitly chose practical tools over weapons, mentally framing them for utility as they prepared for what would be a grueling 3-hour drive up to his Uncle Ray's remote mountain cabin. But of course, the route was anything but simple. Blocked highways forced them onto a dirt farm road, which led them right into a harrowing choke point at the Wheelan Bridge. This source text paints a really vivid, terrifying contrast here. You have this flat, quiet, agricultural landscape suddenly disrupted by the sight of an abandoned yellow school bus. But the thing is, it wasn't empty. It was filled with small, pacing figures, and the exterior panels were covered in tiny handprints. It's a stark, horrifying reminder that the math of the infection spared absolutely no one, forcing them to squeeze the Subaru past the scene without ever stopping. Section 3. The cabin's shifting variables. Arriving at Uncle Ray's remote cabin shifts our explainer entirely into the complex calculus of group dynamics. It is fascinating how chance pulls together a highly functional unit out of complete strangers. They aren't just a family anymore. Sandra brings hardcore logistics and rationing skills. Nor, a park ranger who actually arrived there first, establishes strict perimeter security. Then you have Deshawn, an engineering grad student who escaped through maintenance tunnels. He's the one who repairs their shortwave radio. Rachel adds clinical medical knowledge as a paramedic. And Gabe, an injured truck driver, becomes this invaluable spotter. Together, they form a comprehensive survival ecosystem.
But that ecosystem carries a really heavy metric: 7. That's 7 people, including Eli's sister Lainey and a grieving teacher named Owen, now entirely crammed into a tiny, uninsulated cabin that was originally built for weekend hunting trips. Every single breathing body in that room adds to the intense pressure of their daily reality. Which brings us to a core concept: trade-offs. This becomes the central law of their existence. While adding people like Rachel and Deshawn brought vital, specialized skills to the table, it simultaneously accelerated the depletion of their critical, finite resources. They were burning through supplies so fast that this group of 7 now only had 3 weeks of food left and absolutely zero insulation to survive the impending winter. The math was fundamentally turning against them. Section 4. The final calculation. This is where Deshawn's jury-rigged shortwave radio forces the ultimate decision. Suddenly, out of the static comes this looping broadcast. This is FEMA Emergency Coordination Point Echo 7 active safe zone established at Fort Ridley. After days of just terrifying silence, this message acts as a massive gravitational pull of organized hope. It suggests that civilization hasn't completely ended, it's just contracted to defensible points. But a looping broadcast is also a massive unknown. So, this loops us into a brutal binary choice that instantly fractures the group. Do they stay or do they go? Noor advocates for the strict logic of staying. The cabin is defensible, it's known territory, and they still have 2 weeks of carefully rationed food left. On the flip side, Sandra and Lainey champion leaving. They argue that the unverified FEMA broadcast and the promise of a military escort are absolutely worth risking the entirely unknown and likely deadly dangers of the road. I really want you to pause for a second and feel the weight of this variable. 60. That is the distance in miles separating their fragile mountain sanctuary from Fort Ridley. 60 miles of unverified, highly dangerous, and potentially infected territory. In a world where a single mile can hold a fatal choke point, 60 miles is an almost insurmountable variable. But ultimately, Eli makes the call. They're all going to go together. Since they're traveling under Noor's strict tactical guidance, the preparation is incredibly meticulous. Over 12 hours, she maps the route and designates fallback bypasses for every expected choke point. They ration exactly 1 day's supply of food per person, acknowledging a hard truth: they either make it or food just isn't going to matter. Rachel preps a medical kit, specifically outfitting it with makeshift tourniquets. And finally, Gabriel and Eli physically bolt a piece of corrugated metal from the woodshed to the front of the Subaru, creating a makeshift plow so they can push aside barricades, or bodies, without destroying the car's engine. Section 5. The remainder. The group miraculously navigates those 60 miles and actually reaches the military fences of Fort Ridley on the second evening. But as you'll see, this explainer doesn't end with a simple cinematic victory. Eli later writes, "The distance between courage and coincidence is where I live now. The tooth still hurts. Some days I let it." Even inside the safe zone, Eli is deeply haunted by unresolved threads. You have Owen, who still checks the gates every single morning for his missing wife. Eli's girlfriend Mara is just an endless lingering silence. And that mundane toothache, literally the entire accidental reason Eli is still breathing, serves as a constant physical anchor tying him back to the collapse of his world. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to consider. When the math of survival finally adds up and you actually make it safely behind the fences, how do you live with the psychological remainder? In the wake of an outbreak like this, true survival isn't just a finish line you cross. It's an ongoing, haunting state of being. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Stay curious, keep analyzing the variables in your own life, and I will see you in the next explainer.